What the Pel is up, everybody? This is Pelicans Plus with Elliot Clough at Elliot Clough on Twitter, as you can see right there. We're joined today by Christian Clark of NOLA.com. Huge guest here, Christian. Like we've been talking about, crazy 2 weeks coming up here. We really appreciate you stopping by. How you doing, man? Are you keeping up?
Yeah, man, I'm doing great. They're introducing Willie Green as head coach tomorrow, so should be out in person doing that. That'll be exciting. I'm expecting probably some trades on draft night, which is going to be terrible to handle on deadline, and then free agency. So I think it's going to be a really busy 10 days here.
Yeah. So you're doing that in person tomorrow. That's awesome. That's are you excited? Like when did you know that was gonna be a thing?
Yeah, they let us know late last week that we'd be able to get out there. It sounds like it's going to be at the practice facility. So yeah, I mean, I am excited for any human contact. I mean, I'm fully vaxxed. I mean, I've been living life pretty normally this summer, like seeing some music, going out to bars. But no, it'll be good, man.
That's great. I'm excited to see that too. Obviously, we have the opportunity to tune in on YouTube and Twitter and stuff like that. I tweet out the quotes from the press conference, but I'm not allowed to ask questions. So I'm all about that. But let's get right into it. Most pressing issue in front of the Pelicans coming up is the draft on Thursday. Number 10 pick along with 35, 40, 43, and 53, excuse me. At that number 10 spot, we spoke with Derek Murray. I'm not for sure if you're familiar with Derek Murray from basketballnews.com, but we spoke with him on Thursday of last week, talked about what their options are. And I know you've talked about the possibility of a trade and maybe the likelihood of a trade at 10. But should they hold on to the pick? What he said was what he was hearing was Corey Kispert, Moses Moody, and Jonathan Kuminga as possibilities or the most likely options for them to take. Who are you liking at 10? Should they hold on to that pick? Anybody that sticks out to you that would be the most ideal?
Yeah, I mean, Kuminga is really interesting if he's there at 10. I mean, that's a guy who, a lot of people who follow this stuff closely thought could be the number one pick a year ago. I can't say I've watched a bunch of his full games. I can't say I've, scouted him really in depth, but I mean, I think he's a really interesting player and just the talent level. If he's there at 10, I mean, I think you got to think long and hard about that. I personally am a fan of Corey Kispert. I think he's going to be really good in the NBA. I can see why people think that is a reach at 10. I guess there's kind of this debate of do you really swing for upside? And, maybe this is one of your last chances to draft a true star because this is probably the best pick you have for a long, long time. Or should you draft more for need and fit? I think I tend to be on the side of upside and drafting for star potential. I guess I'm more partial to Kuminga if he's there. I think Josh Giddey is really interesting rather than a Kispert. I mean, I totally get the fit. I think he's going to be a good player, but I don't know. I just think that if you're a small market team in New Orleans, it's just so hard to be, a really good team. If you want to compete for championships, I think you just got to take some risks sometimes.
And with Kuminga, the upside is so high, but the downside is so low too. We saw how good he could be in shout out to this guy listening. Yeah, you're telling me. Appreciate Christian stopping by. But anyway, so the upside with Kuminga being so high and the downside being so low too. I mean, you almost have to go for it, right? I mean, and you'd think that the Kings would do that right in front of them too, or you're the Magic, but the intriguing, or Moses Moody's intriguing as well. Do you like Moody at 10 if he falls there?
Yeah, I do like Moody a lot. I mean, that one makes a lot of sense to me. I think he's a guy with a really high floor. It's hard to see to me how he busts in the NBA, 6'6", already a talented scorer, 7'1" wingspan, gets to the free throw line. He had a 19 free throw attempt game against Alabama, I think. He's got shot making ability, size, length. I like him a lot for sure.
And the off-ball movement, his ability to relocate for open shots. I mean, I just tweeted yesterday about Bradley Beal. Obviously everybody loves the idea of getting him to New Orleans, adding him to Bi and Zion. If you're able to hold on to a Brandon Ingram in that situation, and his off-ball movement, his ability to play without the ball is just awesome. And that's definitely something you're looking for with especially point Zion and maybe putting the ball in, Kyra Lewis's hands eventually. And if you hold on to, there's so many different things that can happen. And that's why we're here to talk about him today. But in that recent article, I saw that you had Kispert, Moody, Giddey, Wagner, and then Trey Murphy. There's that rumor going around now that the Pels may trade Eric Bledsoe and the number 10 pick to the Grizzlies for 17. Obviously, they're going to need to get some money in exchange for that as well, i.e. like a role player, Grayson Allen, the DeAnthony Melton, something like that. What did you think of that rumor when it came out yesterday?
Yeah, that's honestly like something I'd heard a while back. I mean, I think there's some legitimacy to it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that they're going to seriously consider going into draft night. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I mean, I think any of number of things could happen, but I mean, on paper, it it makes some sense to me. You move back 7 spots, you get off the Bledsoe contract. I mean, I think there's just no way you can bring Bledsoe back after the year he had last year. Like, I mean, it was like the guy just didn't try. I mean, I think it was like kind of poisonous at times. I mean, it was awful. So I just don't think there's any way you can bring it back. And getting off that contract, gives you some flexibility to upgrade your roster in other ways. I mean, it honestly, like, it kind of stinks that like you have this 10th pick. It's probably your highest pick for a couple of years, and you're moving back. But like maybe if you can get a guy like Murphy, guy who can shoot the ball, length at 17, like, you get back Grayson Allen and you got flexibility to do other things. That's not so bad. But I guess I would have to see the specifics of it too. And, it depends like how the board falls too. Right.
And the thing about moving back, when I saw it and I was like 7 spots, and I didn't think about the fact that you have to get money back, but I didn't do the mock trade or anything like that to make sure. But if you get an Allen or a DeAnthony Melton or like I said, whoever in that sort of trade scenario, that makes it a little bit more intriguing to me for sure. And like you said, like you see how the board falls. I mean, if you can get Kispert there, like that's great value. And I've seen him falling pretty significantly in some mocks lately. The upside it's just not there.
Yeah, I mean, if I'd sign me up if you can get Kispert at 17 and make that trade, like I'm all about it.
Right. Is there anybody else that you like if you trade back in a scenario like that? I know you mentioned Murphy, Kispert. I don't know, maybe a Cam Thomas. I don't necessarily see him going that high, but
yeah, I mean, those are probably the 2 names. I mean, those names, I included in the article, 5 guys you could see them taking the first round. I would say, most of that was like there was a little reporting involved. It wasn't. It was more reporting than speculation, like the reason to believe they like all these guys. I mean, I've definitely heard they like Murphy. I haven't really been able to nail down, like, do you like him so much you would take him at 10? Yeah. I guess skeptical, but yeah, I think there are, people in the front office who like Murphy quite a bit, and just a name to watch, I think, going into draft night.
And what you're hoping for Murphy is definitely that prototypical 3-and-D guy, right? I mean, he's 6'9", he can shoot the basketball, and he can be like a 3-4 tweener that can pair with Zion and Bi really well. I mean, in a situation like that, you might have to put Bi if they're on the court at the same time, which it's inevitably going to happen. Bi at the 2 and put Murphy in at the 3-4, and that could be really damn fun to watch. And obviously, the pull for a lot of people is adding more shooting, adding more spacing around Zion, and Murphy can bring that as well. And like I mentioned, Cam Thomas in there. Trey Mann is really intriguing as well. That guy can make shots. Do you know much about Mann?
Honestly, no, I haven't looked at it closely.
Okay, fair enough. And we'll let you do your research, maybe get you back on. But anyway, we have somebody here, Benny and the Jets one, asking about Duarte at 17. I like Duarte in a vacuum, but the fact that he's 24 has me a little pull. I mean, like, if he falls to 20 something and the Pels are in that range by way of trade, you kind of have to pull the trigger just because of the talent. But his age makes it a little iffy for me. The Pels are caught between competing right now and going long term. And when you go with the draft, I'd prefer long term.
Yeah, it kind of feels like the NBA opinion on older prospects has changed a little bit. In the past 2 years, and I wonder how much of that is due to the Cam Johnson thing. I mean, I remember when the Suns made that pick, like it was like widely panned. People hated it. And I mean, it turns out it was a really nice pick for them. I mean, he's been able to contribute, right away. Really good shooter, good athleticism. I wonder how much of that has contributed to like people kind of changing their tune on some of these older prospects.
You got to think, because Cam Johnson has been awesome. And like, I mean, he's a stretch four and he can defend. He's a little slight, but yeah, you're exactly right. And now we're getting questions all about 17. Jalen Johnson at 17. That's a possibility. I'm not huge on Johnson. Obviously his willingness to, leave the Duke program and not stay at IMG Academy makes me nervous. And I don't know if you've done a ton of homework on Jalen Johnson, Christian, but I would prefer a Murphy, and you might not get that high ceiling like you do with Johnson, but you don't come with the baggage, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know what the intel is on Johnson. Like, I haven't like poked around and like, what are people saying about, him leaving Duke and him bouncing around at all these schools. I'd be really curious about it. But the Pelicans, they know a lot of people at Duke, so I'm sure that they're getting the down low.
For sure. And now, speaking of the draft trades, all of that, and Duke, Cam Reddish is a name being flown around with the Hawks. I personally love the idea of going out and getting a Cam Reddish. Not that the Pelicans, I don't think I've seen anything about the Pelicans being involved. I don't know if you're hearing anything in that realm, but people have been talking about Cam Reddish coming to the Pelicans, at least on Twitter, which we know is a little bit biased, but about him coming to the Pelicans for a while. I think he'd be an awesome fit. We saw how he came in not randomly, but came in off injury in the playoffs and really contributed for the Hawks. What would you think about an addition of a Cam Reddish type?
And I hate to, I don't know. I hate to be a downer, but I'm just not really much of a Cam Reddish guy. I don't know, man. I mean, I watched the playoff game where he hit all those threes. I think it was like the number of threes he hit in that game was cool. Like it wasn't that far off from like the total number of threes he hit in the regular season. I mean, he's just, I don't know. I mean, like the field goal percentage in college in his first 2 years in the pro, like terrifies me. I think it was below 40%, all those years. I mean, that's like, to me, that's just like a scary indicator of like a guy's like below 40%, like in college, 2 years in the pros. I don't know. I like him on defense, but I just don't know about him on offense.
And that's fair. I mean, when you look at the athletic ability, that is definitely intriguing for anybody. But the thing about it too is when Cam was going off in that playoff game, I mean, you looked all over, again, to reference Twitter, all these young guys who were in the class or playing with him before, like we told you, Cam is awesome. And it was just coming to light for the first time. Obviously, a little bit of injury history. But in my humble opinion, you can never have too many young and talented wings. So I'd maybe a little bit more interested in Cam Reddish than Christian. But it also depends on what you're giving up, because you don't necessarily want to give up the number 10 pick in a situation like that if you don't have to. But anyway, in terms of that trade and number 10, we've been hearing rumors surrounding Miles Turner, Kyle Lowry, all of that. And I'm sure there's more floating around right now. Are you hearing anything extra in terms of if they keep the pick or try to make a big splash with it? I know you're leaning more that they trade.
Yeah, I've kind of thought that it's more likely, the number 10 pick is on the move for like months now. I mean, I think even David Griffin said at the like his end of season press conference in May, he's like he even brought up the possibility that it could be on the move to go get proven help. Everything I've heard, like kind of off the record, since then from different people in the organization is like it's more likely to be on the move. Like I honestly would be a little bit surprised if they made the pick at 10. I mean, again, that's just kind of how the board falls. Like if Kuminga's there or something like that, or somebody really interesting falls at 10, like, yeah, I guess you got to think hard about it. But yeah, I've kind of, I would definitely bet and have felt this way for a while that the 10 is going to be on the move.
Okay. And are you hearing any names necessarily tied to that for the Pelicans of who they'd want to go after, maybe a position or a type of role that they want to get in exchange, or are they just looking for a veteran?
I mean, I think they definitely know that their backcourt needs upgrading. I mean, I think the Lonzo Ball, Eric Bledsoe pairing, like you obviously you can't just run that back. Like that was just really really tough for you. Um, outside shooting is like the big one that everybody dwells on, and I think for good reason. Like when you're 25th and 26th in 3-point attempts and 3-point percentage, and you have this guy who like scores more at the rim since anybody since Prime Shaq and is a pretty good passer. Like that's not great. That needs to be a lot better. And I think the ones that Dave Griffin mentioned too in May is basketball IQ and toughness. Like they need some smarts in those backcourt spots. And like I think Lonzo Ball is, he's a guy who has basketball IQ, but like he can't really play out of the pick and roll in the half court. I mean, Eric Bledsoe like didn't do anything for you last year. So like, shot creation, a guard who can play out of the pick and roll a little bit, like a guy who can control the game a little bit more than they had. But I mean, the backcourt just needs to be better than it was last year.
By the sounds of it, you're alluding to Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely addresses a lot of those needs. I mean, I think like a lot of people have said, I mean, there's just like a ton of smoke of like the Pelicans are interested in Lowry, like almost so much that like a part of me is like, man, I'm skeptical. Like it's just there's just so much of this. But I mean, look, he definitely helps you become tougher. He's a really smart player, great passer, like high volume 3-point shooter, year in and year out, shoots at a pretty good rate. Like he definitely helps you in all those areas. I guess my thing is like, he's going into year 16 this upcoming year. I think what people point to the Chris Paul thing, like Chris Paul was going into year 16 last year. He's the exact same age Kyle Lowry is this year. Like, it could have a similar effect. Like the Suns were a fringe playoff team. He took them to the finals, number 2 seed. Yeah, I mean, I think, the Pelicans, maybe they could be a team. I would like them to make the playoffs. They got Lowry. I mean, maybe they could be a team in the West that challenges for home court advantage. But like, if the Lowry thing falls through, then you've really put a lot of eggs in that basket and you might be kind of screwed. Like, like small guards in their age 16 season, just because we just saw it happen with Chris Paul. Like, are you super confident that Kyle Lowry is going to be, maintain his level of play these next 2 years? I mean, I think so. I don't feel great about it. I mean, I don't know. It gives me a little bit of pause of just a small guard in year 16 and 17 and like giving him, like $60 million over those 2 years. That does scare me a little bit.
Yeah, and especially if you do it in the sign and trade because it has to be 3 years minimum. So you don't necessarily want to lock up a 36-year-old guard to come back and play when he's 39. I mean, for frame of reference, Willie Green is 39. Like, yeah. It's not necessarily something you're looking for. But it is, I mean, you always got to balance risk and reward, right? Because if you bring back Lonzo Ball instead of going out and getting a Kyle Lowry and you've got him at, 4 years, $84 million, that's a very tradable contract for Lonzo Ball, at least in my opinion, unless he takes some sort of nosedive coming up here in the next couple of years, because he's just consistently gotten better every year. Now, does that make me want to keep him over Kyle Lowry, especially in the short term? Probably not. But when you look at Lowry, the dude, I mean, he's just wins. Like, he's so loved in Toronto as well. And whether or not, he takes them to the playoffs, maybe they get to the semis, I'm for that. Like, obviously it depends on how much you give up. And if you do a sign and trade, you're probably going to give up a Steven Adams. What do? You obviously got to get rid of Eric Bledsoe. I said Steven Adams. They were 29th in defensive rebounding this last year. So Adams would help a lot. But if you don't have to give up that 10th pick, that's great. It's just, is Lowry the best option going forward? You just got to weigh all the possibilities with, Miles Turner, maybe CJ McCollum. Is that something that you'd agree with?
I mean, I would love CJ McCollum.
Yeah.
That's probably got to be a 3-teamer to get him because like Portland is under a lot of pressure to get better right now. Like picks do absolutely nothing for Portland. You'd have to rope a third team in. It could get complicated, but like, I mean, CJ McCollum is like, um, you know, that's pretty close to ideal offensively. What you'd like to put next to Zion Williamson, like just a guy whose nails off the dribble, like can take the pull-up three, really good shot creation, makes sense next to Nickeil Alexander-Walker to me a lot. I mean, I think that would be fantastic. It just seems unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, how do you make that work, right? Like, do they want? I mean, and if they get rid of Damian, you'd think that they'd be shopping CJ too, but because they'd go full rebuild. At least in my opinion, maybe not. But if they're holding on to Dame, what are they going to want in exchange? I mean, we had Ali Kosel and a few other guys on we do roundtables here with some guys from different sources of Pelicans media, and Ollie said that he thought they'd have to give up Brandon Ingram to go get CJ McCollum, and I just completely disagree with that. Jake Madison said that they wouldn't even be willing to give up number 10 to go get CJ. I mean, do they have to part with some of the young guys? And that goes, again, across all of these possible trades, especially with Miles Turner and CJ McCollum. What would you be willing to give up in a situation like that, whether it's a 2-teamer or a 3-teamer?
Yeah, I mean, definitely not Brandon Ingram. I mean, if it's like Damian Lillard, I mean, yeah, I think that's something you seriously have to consider. But I just don't think, CJ, like he's a finished product. He's not getting any better. He's, a very good player, but not even an all-star player in the Western Conference. I mean, I definitely wouldn't give up Ingram. I mean, maybe like 10 and Kyra Lewis Jr. in a future first or something like that. I would definitely do that, but like, yeah, they're going to be looking for, immediate help. That probably isn't a backcourt player because it's kind of been, one of their problems is like their best 2 players are these small guards and like they need help, at forward. I'm sure, they're calling Philadelphia like, hey, what do you guys think about like CJ McCollum for Ben Simmons? That's something that would really help them. But yeah, I mean, Ingram is like way too rich for my blood.
Yeah, same. So when we're talking about Turner here, we talked about how to go out and get Lowry versus McCollum. When it comes to Turner, these rumors have been around for years now. It's almost like inevitable that either it happens or we just keep getting these rumors for the rest of his career. I haven't looked at the contract situation. I'd probably have to do that. I definitely should have done that before I sat down today, but hey, here we are. So for Turner, I know a lot of my friends who cover the Pacers are huge on trying to get Lonzo Ball. A lot of them also really like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Obviously, you don't want to have to do that if you can give something else up. Personally, I would give up. I mean, obviously, we like to throw in Kyra Lewis as opposed to and Jackson Hayes because we've seen a lot from those two more than Kyra. And so Kyra and some picks, and I don't know. I'd preferably that, but looking at the rest of the roster, it depends. Are you going to be able to sign and trade Josh Hart to Indianapolis? I kind of doubt it. What are your thoughts there in terms of going and getting Turner?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty low on Miles Turner. I mean, I don't know. It takes too many threes for me. Like he's not, offensively, like I feel like he can't just like get you a bucket inside, like when you need him to, like, like team switch. He can't punish smaller players. I mean, I guess it definitely helps you in rim protection, but I just don't think he's that impactful. I mean, that said, if he's gettable, I think on something like that's pretty reasonable and affordable, and you're bringing in backcourt help, then yeah, that's something I would consider. But I would need to see what all the pieces look like. I don't know. I guess he's fine. Like it's much better fit than Steven Adams for sure. I get all that. Like, the price points are like almost the same. Like, yeah, I would definitely rather have Miles Turner on this roster, I think, but I don't love him.
And trading for Steven Adams and Miles Turner straight up is it's just not going to happen. There are a few teams in the league that would be willing to take on Steven Adams, especially for that price point that he's being paid now. And also, I didn't even think about adding Eric Bledsoe. Hopefully, you could do a situation like that where the Pacers are wanting to take him on or willing to take him on for maybe a first or a future first. And I get what you're saying too in terms of helping with rim protection. He takes too many threes. He's definitely better fit for Adams or as opposed to Adams for me. And to backtrack a little bit, we've talked about the desire to get rid of Eric Bledsoe this offseason, right? Do you think Steven Adams is in that echelon? We're getting a few questions about Steven Adams here and whether or not we think that we should give him up or how we'd get rid of him or the Pelicans would get rid of him. I'm thinking, Charlotte and Toronto are really going to be the two teams that would make a play for him. Are there any thoughts there as far as how that happens or who would be willing to take on that contract?
Yeah, I mean those two teams, make a lot of sense to me. I've definitely poked around on the trade machine of Adams to Charlotte deals. I mean, one that makes sense when you plug it in is Adams for Devontae Graham. Graham, a guy who shoots a ton of threes, definitely helps you with shot creation. I think he attempted 9 threes per game or something like that this last season. I think he's a pretty nice player. I guess maybe you could throw him out as a starting guard with You ideally like to bring him off the bench, maybe a 6-man. But yeah, that's one trade that makes sense to me. I kind of look at this like Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams are both just tough fits, I think, with Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. But to me, I feel if I was running the team, I would feel more urgency to get off of Eric Bledsoe, just because I think he just mailed it in last year. I think with Steven Adams, there was at least a baseline level of effort, and I think I think he was actually pretty good at times defensively. I think really the issue with him last year was he just kind of wore down. To me, he looked so much more mobile and active at the beginning of the season. And as the season went along and it was a game every other day, he lost a lot of that mobility, at least to me. I mean, I think he had 3 steals and 2 blocks that opening night win over Toronto, looked pretty good defensively. And, the problem with the defense last year is they don't really have guys that can guard on the perimeter and they get funneled to the rim. And Steven Adams is not really a backline eraser, I mean, I think he's solid. He's a good rebounder, but he's not going to clean up mistakes at all. He's not Rudy Gobert. He is not. So yeah, it was just tough. I mean, if you're asking Steven Adams to erase a lot of perimeter players' defensive mistakes, it's just not going to happen.
And you could blame he's getting older. I mean, I think he's 29 now. Was 28 last season. You'd prefer somebody be a little bit more mobile at 28 than he was.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's not a lob threat. He is not really that impactful on offense in a lot of ways, unless he gets a mismatch down low or something like that. The positive for Steven Adams is his ability to guard the Joel Embiids, the Nikola Jokic's, but there's just not that many bigs that are that effective in the NBA now. And I think a lot of people, namely our friends over at Pro Pels Talk, are like, Billy Hernan Gomez, considering his contract, we'd rather have him than Steven Adams and paying him $17 million. And I'm sure there's some other fans out there that feel the same way. It's just the cons for me and for a lot of people outweigh the positives. But your priority, like you said, is getting rid of Eric Bledsoe because of how just awful he was last year. So I'd agree with you there. In terms of trades, let's continue that conversation a little bit here. Is there anybody else you're particularly interested in? Those are the few big names that we've heard about pretty consistently for a while now. For me, I like the idea of adding a Colin Sexton. Obviously, that messes a little bit with the long-term and even the short-term plan because he's a free agent after this coming season. And then there's, the two Kings guy, Harrison Barnes and Buddy Hield, former Pelican Buddy Hield. Do those names intrigue you? Any other guys out there that you have been talking about workshopping trades for or are hearing anything?
Yeah, I mean, I personally love the idea of Buddy Hield. I mean, I think he's just an elite shooter. I mean, I think he's one of the 5 best 3-point shooters in the NBA. Catch and shoot, nails, definitely can shoot it off of movement. I mean, I really do think offensively, the path to being a really, really good offensive team is you got Zion Williamson, you got Brandon Ingram, and then like put some elite shooting next to them. And, I think in the playoffs, like that could change a little bit. Like you just need multiple creators and the degree of difficulty goes up so much. But I mean, please let me see like Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram play in some space. I mean, the seasons that they just had, the volume and efficiency that they posted, with not a lot of space to work with was really impressive to me at their ages. I mean, I like Buddy Hield a lot. It makes sense to me. I mean, defensively, yeah, of course, I'd be worried about this team. But there aren't just many pieces that like fix everything for the Pelicans right now.
So I'm on board with you 100% with Buddy Hield, especially with what he brings to the table. And when it comes to that, then you run into the idea, assuming that the Pels are still holding on to their picks in that scenario, which I would not necessarily give up 10 for Hield. That'd be a conversation to be had. But personally, I would not go after a Kispert in that situation because you added the shooting. Would you still want to add that level of shooting, or would you more lean towards going into free agency? It's just, where do you add more shooting? Do you need to add a significant amount of shooting after getting a Buddy Hield like that?
I mean, probably not. I mean, I think, in that scenario, you could roll out a starting backcourt of Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Buddy Hield, Ingram, Zion, and then, either Adams or I guess like, starting center X, replacement level center. I mean, to me, like that's enough. And I like that group a lot offensively. It's kind of one of the interesting things about Nickeil last year was when you look at just that sample of games he started, I think in the spring, like he was a really high volume 3-point shooter. Like he was taking like 9 threes per game. He was shooting at a pretty good rate. I mean, I think I trust, his outside shot, when he's playing next to other creators. And, I mean, I just trust his creation ability too. I mean, he's said in the past, like he's not the most comfortable playing point guard. Like he'd rather play off the ball than on the ball. But I mean, I think he could do it. And, I mean, those 4 guys together offensively, like, I think that would be fantastic.
It would take some adjustment from Nah. I think he was better off the ball than on it as well this season. And he said he's more of a shooting guard, but he can play with the ball in his hands, just not, a lot. And I think you would agree with me here. Before Nah got injured this last season, that ankle, he was awesome. I was like, Pels are play bound. He's making shots. He was the tertiary playmaker behind Brandon Ingram and Zion. So I think, excuse me, and his defense, perimeter defense, arguably the best on the team. Obviously him and Lonzo. But I'm huge on Nah, and that's a big reason why I don't want to trade him. Maybe starting center X is Jackson Hayes. Who knows? We can hope, but we'll see when we approach it. I'm also, like I said, a big fan of Colin Sexton. The thing about Sexton is a lot of people say he doesn't pass the ball. A lot of people say he doesn't play defense and all that. Well, not passing the ball, he hasn't played with caliber players like Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. I would like to think that would change. And Willie Green has a history of buy-in, cultivating buy-in with his players, i.e. a Devin Booker, and making them at least halfway decent defenders. How do you feel about Sexton, all contract included, and the ability to go get him based on what other teams are willing to give up?
Yeah, I mean, just Colin Sexton, the player, not getting into any of the contract stuff for a second. I mean, I think, it makes some sense. I mean, like, he definitely has flaws. Like he's undersized. Like, yeah, you'd like the playmaking to be better. But guys who are 24 points per game scores at that age, who could score at all 3 levels, they don't grow on trees. I think, another thing that I like about him is that, he just plays hard every night. And, I think the Pelicans could use some of that, like a guy who just like, has a motor that's at 10 night in and night out. I mean, that's one of my biggest complaints about Brandon Ingram. It's like, you got to bring it every night, especially if you want to be the max guy. So I like that about him. I mean, I love the competitiveness. talented scorer. I'd be really curious to see, what he looks like if he's a little bit more willing to share the ball in like a new context next to some guys who are more talented than him. I honestly, I worry about like paying him max money. I mean, if like you're three, like obviously Zion Williamson is getting a max this first day he's able to. Brandon Ingram's already on one. If you're three guys, or Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and Colin Sexton, they're all getting like maxes. I mean, how good are you? I just don't know. I don't love that.
Okay, that's fair enough. Talking me out of one of my high points on this podcast. My favorite clip.
I mean, I think he's a good player. I think he's a good player for sure.
My favorite clip of Colin Sexton is in the summer league. I think it was when he was rookie guarding Josh Hart, doing the thing where he's clenching his hands. I'm like, oh my gosh, the Pelicans need that so bad. So that's been a big pull for me with him. And like you said, the intensity with which he plays every night.
Cleveland, it seems so like toxic that like I just want to see what he looks like in another context. Like I remember like 5 games into his career, there was like, like anonymous sources in the Athletic or whatever being like, oh, like this guy never passes the ball, this and then. It's like this guy's like 19 years old, like I don't know. It's tough to like be anonymously killing your 19-year-old point guard 5 games into his career. So he's one of those guys. Like I'm really curious to see what he looks like in another context because Cleveland it seems rough.
Yeah, and I mean, and also he was the guy at Alabama too. Like it's just he's got to have some different, like you said, different context, different players to play with, guys that he trusts, because they're not growing on trees in Cleveland. And now in terms of free agency, not something that a lot of people have talked about, at least that I have seen within Pelicans media. Everybody's focusing on the draft and trades right now, which fair enough. I mean it's a lot to take in at this moment in time. The draft coming up here on Thursday. Anybody in free agency that piques your interest or somebody that you'd like to add? Have you looked into it at all, given what I just said about the trades and the draft?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to like even get there just because I'm like, well, it just like so much of this just depends on what happens Thursday. I mean, I'm just kind of I'm expecting a trade to happen Thursday. I mean, they could stay at 10, I guess, but like so much of what happens in free agency is gonna, I think, depend on what happens Thursday. So for me, it's like I just got to get through that first.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. And I think, I mean, golly, I've said it podcast after podcast, there's just so much that could happen this offseason. Like I looked into it for this podcast, and we talked about it a little bit before with some other guys before we knew Stan Van Gundy was getting fired and all of that. So it's shooting and defense, right? Like the needs don't change, right? So I mean, to go down the list, like Kelly Olynyk, Alec Burks, Reggie Bullock, Mo Harkless, Torrey Craig, Duncan Robinson, Dwayne Dedman, like those. And I'm not looking towards the top. I'm not looking at DeMar DeRozan, because like you said, they're going to have to pay somebody if they go, especially that high. And also, well, that's kind of a fair point. There's.
I think it is. I mean, it's just, if they'd laid a little more groundwork these past 2 years and like, if they'd made the right head coaching hire a year ago, like, gotten Willie Green or their Willie Green a year ago, like they'd be in such a better spot. But like, yeah, I don't think it's looked at as a desirable destination right now. There's just a lot of uncertainty from the outside looking in.
What makes it a desirable destination is Zion and maybe Brandon Ingram. And there's always conversation if Zion's leaving or not. So it's just a situation where, do I want to lock myself into this small market that is appeared to be a little bit dysfunctional? A little bit might be a stretch, but to continue a little bit more here as we're winding down, Willie officially made the next head coach of the Pelicans last Thursday. I'm excited about that. I've been talking about how the things that he brings to the table really, really intrigue me. I think he's a perfect middle ground between Gentry and Stan Van Gundy. Like you said, press conference tomorrow. Have you been able to talk to him or anything like that? Have you reached out or has anything you talked to him at all?
I honestly have not talked to Willie yet.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to getting some FaceTime tomorrow. But I've gotten to speak to a couple people around him. I talked to Doc Rivers, who is one of the people who tried to hire Willie as soon as he retired. And, he basically said that he offered Willie, a job when he's still a player. And that's how he thinks of him. I think Willie was, it's the right idea. I mean, with these assistants, you just don't know until they get in the job. Like, it's just being in charge is such a different skill set than being an assistant, and there's so much more pressure, and like often it's difficult to continue to maintain really good relationships with these stars when like you've got to be, the quote unquote bad cop sometimes. You've got to be the guy like getting in them. But like I think everything, all the intel you hear about like his leadership style and how he holds people accountable, it's really, really encouraging. And I think the Pelicans, they definitely needed to go younger at head coach, because I think one of the biggest issues is that the two previous head coaches, both in their 60s, they have not enjoyed this like new age leadership style where management wants input. I mean, you got to have somebody who is okay with that. I'm not even saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's how it is, and you got to have somebody who's with it. And I think Willie is definitely more likely to be than Alvin Gentry and Stan Van Gundy.
Yeah, that's a big pull for me. Basically, I don't think I've really heard anything negative. Anything negative about Willie is speculation of how is he going to be as a head coach, because he's only been an assistant, right? That's where a lot of and I saw the grades that I think you, Scott Kushner, and Rod Walker put together for your roundtable regarding Willie. And I agree. I would hold it more towards. I think you graded it a B. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. That's where I'd have it to, just because of the unknown factor.
Right? Yeah, there's just so much I don't know.
Exactly.
It's hard to have like a real strong opinion about these things. But
right, exactly. Have you heard anything about the assembling of a staff, like any players, or not players, but any coaches that would maybe be a part of the staff? Like we've heard about Sam Mitchell, and then obviously wanting to keep around Fred Vincent, Teresa Weatherspoon.
Yeah, I think Fred Vincent and Teresa Weatherspoon will definitely be back in the staff next year. I don't expect Bob Byer or Rex to be back. Sam Mitchell, I heard he interviewed with the Pelicans, I guess 2 weeks ago now. I think that's definitely a name to watch. David Griffin worked with him at Turner. Mitchell has a pretty good relationship with Zion in his camp. He's been a head coach before. So, I think, whoever they look at for two of these assistant coach vacancies, I think I would be surprised if one of them is not someone who's been a head coach before, just to have that experience factor with, next to a 39-year-old guy. But yeah, Mitchell makes some sense to me. I haven't really heard any updates on that front lately. But I would definitely, expect like experience to be pretty important in whoever they bring in.
Do you know if you can release this information? Do you know if they've hired anybody else for, or not hired, but interviewed anybody else for that lead assistant position?
I honestly haven't heard about anybody else that I've like completely nailed down.
Okay, fair enough. Sam Mitchell definitely intrigues me, considering he's coached Zion before and everything like that. One more question regarding the staff and everything. This is a great question. Jamal Amiri Hamed. Does anyone know if Green is okay with Point Zion, or maybe, is he okay is a phrasing that I wouldn't use. Is he intrigued by it? Is it something that he wants to use with the Pels?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. The Point Zion thing, it's gotten a little polarizing, and like to me, I don't know. I made a big deal out of it because I thought it was really significant that they went to it and had basically the number one offense for 2 months in a row there. I think it is a big deal, but I also think like people are making too much of it, and there's this idea that the Pelicans, they only want to play, Zion at point guard, and like it's dissuading them from like bringing in, a really good guard who is more of like that pure point guard type. I don't think that's true at all. I just think like they just want more good basketball players. I don't know. I think it's definitely something they can continue leading into, but like I don't think they're going to be like, we've got to run this 95% of the time,
Just put the ball in his hands because he's a playmaker.
Yeah, it's something he can do.
Right, yeah. Right. And then we'll leave you with one question because I want to be respectful of your time here. I saw the video that you tweeted of Steven Adams putting up shots. Have you seen much of that? What do you think?
Yeah, it was kind of funny. There were a lot of people who were like, "Oh, maybe this can happen. Like, maybe he'll develop into a stretch five." I guess I would say, like, a guy 8 years in who's like a 50% free throw shooter. That's a pretty good indicator. That, I mean, I'm not trying to be rude. It's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think Steven Adams is like helpful to a lot of teams in the right context. Like, it's a tough fit here. I still think he played hard. I'm not expecting him to turn into a 3-point shooter or whatever. I mean, it's good to like work on that, and you should never put yourself in a box. But yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath. I don't think.
Something that you can take from draft evaluation and apply here is just because guys are making shots in the open gym does not mean they're going to make them in actual basketball play.
Yeah, I mean, I was a great shooter in practice, and then
right.
When the game started, like the three just did not go down really. So.
Exactly. Christian, thank you so much for joining us. We know you're a busy man, so we'll let you go here. He's Christian Clark, beat writer for the Pelicans for NOLA.com. C Clark 3000 on Twitter. Christian, you are the man. Thank you so much for stopping by and joining us.
Hey man, appreciate you having me on.